When Dr. Charles Whitaker, a quiet black engineer in his 60s, boarded Flight 928 in his Navy suit and polished shoes, he never expected to be publicly humiliated. Minutes later, he was stripped of his first-class seat and forced to the back by a smiling flight attendant who called it a safety reassignment. But what no one knew was that Charles wasn't just any passenger. He had the power to ground that plane and dismantle an entire system. By the time the wheels touched down, the airline's darkest secrets would be exposed, and one woman's smirk would turn into a national scandal. Dr. Charles Whitaker stepped into the cabin of Atlas Air Flight 928 with the quiet confidence of a man who had spent his life mastering complex systems. His polished leather shoes moved with purpose along the carpeted aisle of first class, his slim briefcase tucked beneath one arm, his boarding pass gripped loosely in the other. Dressed in a tailored Navy suit and framed by silver-rimmed glasses, he exuded a dignified calm that turned no heads, and that's exactly how he preferred it. He offered a polite nod to the flight attendant stationed at the first-class galley, who barely looked up from her tablet. The cabin hummed with the low murmur of conversations, clinking glasses, and the rustle of newspapers. Charles made his way to seat 2A, stowed his briefcase, and settled in, pulling out his tablet to review the final slides of his keynote presentation. It was going to be a long flight from New York to San Francisco, but he welcomed the time to polish his notes in peace. That illusion lasted less than 3 minutes. "Excuse me, sir," a voice rang out, sweet on the surface, steely beneath. Charles looked up to see a blonde woman in her early 40s, her bun so tight it pulled at her temples. Her name tag read Bethany Lee. And though her uniform was pristine, her smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm going to need to see your boarding pass again." Charles blinked, confused but obliging. He handed it over without hesitation. Bethany glanced at it briefly, then handed it back with a tight smile that now carried a faint trace of triumph. "I'm sorry, sir. This seat is reserved. You've been reassigned." Charles raised an eyebrow. "I believe there's been a mistake. This is seat 2A. I booked it weeks ago." "Yes, I see that. But due to some adjustments for optimal cabin composition, you'll be more comfortable in another section. Our team has made arrangements." Her tone left no room for argument, but Charles wasn't the type to cause a scene. Not yet. "Where exactly have I been reassigned?" "Seat 32E, she replied smoothly, as if directing him to a complimentary spa rather than the last row of the plane near the lavatory. A murmur spread among the nearby passengers, predominantly white, middle-aged, business-class regulars. A few side glances. One man lowered his newspaper to get a better look. The air thickened. "I see," Charles said quietly. He gathered his tablet and briefcase. He didn't protest, he didn't argue. He stood. As he stepped into the aisle, phones discreetly rose into position. Some passengers tried to look away. Others didn't bother. Bethany watched with the air of someone who had just straightened a painting on the wall. Charles walked the length of the cabin in silence, his polished shoes tapping against the carpet like a slow metronome of humiliation. Row after row passed. 10, 15, 20. Eyes followed him. Some pitied. Others judged. Most just watched. By the time he reached the back of the plane, the sting in his chest had nothing to do with altitude. Seat 32E was exactly as advertised. Cramped, wedged between two strangers, right beside a restroom door that hissed and clicked with mechanical indifference. No room for his briefcase, no privacy, no dignity. He folded himself into the seat and stared forward, expression neutral. And then, it happened. Just as he reached for his seatbelt, Charles glanced up toward the front of the plane and saw Bethany leading a white man in a rumpled blazer and loosened tie into the first-class cabin. The man looked flustered, his carry-on hanging open slightly. He hadn't even shown a boarding pass. Bethany beamed at him like an old friend returning from war. "Mr. Langston," she said with exaggerated cheer, "we're so glad you made it. Right this way." Charles's gaze followed them as she guided the man into seat 2A, his seat. No explanation, no apology, no pretense of weight distribution or cabin composition. The man plopped down, accepted a champagne flute, and began chatting with the executive in 2B like they were fraternity brothers. The twist twisted deeper. Charles sat back in seat 32E, the hiss of the restroom door behind him marking each second like a ticking clock. His breath was steady, but his fingers curled into the armrests. The humiliation wasn't new, but this was personal, strategic, and far too practiced. He powered on his tablet again, no longer to review slides. Instead, he opened an encrypted folder labeled Field Protocols, Tier 1. His thumbprint unlocked it. Bethany Lee had just made the worst mistake of her career. The scent of industrial disinfectant hung thick in the air around seat 32E, an ever-present reminder that Charles Whitaker now occupied one of the most undignified positions on the aircraft. Wedged between a husky man munching trail mix on his left and the humming lavatory to his right, he took a slow breath and silently buckled his seatbelt. He did not belong here, not because he was better than anyone else, but because he had earned something better. The credentials, the ticket, the quiet decades of service, all dismissed by one woman with a frozen smile and a power complex. As the final boarding call echoed overhead, the middle seat beside Charles remained empty, for now. He adjusted his shoulders, angling slightly away from the encroaching elbow of his snacking neighbor. Just as he reached for his noise-canceling earbuds, a soft voice interrupted him. "Excuse me, may I?" Charles turned. A young black woman, no older than 25, stood in the aisle, her uniform blazer folded over one arm. She had a slim build, high cheekbones, and the confident posture of someone used to tight quarters and tight schedules. "It's open," Charles replied, sliding his arm inward to make room. "Thanks," she said with a nod, settling gracefully into the middle seat. Once seated, she extended a hand. "Amara Johnson. I'm deadheading to San Francisco for training. First week at Atlas Air." Charles accepted her handshake with a polite nod. Charles Whitaker. Her eyes narrowed slightly, recognition dawning. "Wait, Dr. Charles Whitaker?" He hesitated, then offered a slight smile. "That's right. As in aviation safety, predictive turbulence systems. You wrote the algorithms for the multi-layered risk profiling platform, didn't you?" Charles chuckled just once. "You've done your homework." "I read your papers in grad school," Amara said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "You're kind of a legend." "What are you doing back here?" Charles' smile faded. "Seat reassignment. Apparently, I didn't fit the visual criteria for first class." Amara's expression hardened. She didn't have to ask who made that call. Her gaze drifted briefly toward the front of the cabin, then back to Charles. "That would be Bethany Lee," she murmured, her voice low but firm. "You know her?" "I've seen her work." She folded her arms tightly. "I'm new to Atlas, but during orientation, we're encouraged to observe senior staff. Bethany's reputation precedes her." Charles raised an eyebrow. Amara leaned closer. "She's done this before, multiple times." "How many?" he asked, voice measured. 8 that I've witnessed or heard directly," Amara whispered. "Always under the same logic, weight distribution or operational reshuffling. But funny how the passengers getting bumped are always people of color. And funny how their seats end up filled by white passengers within 5 minutes." Charles's jaw tightened. Not in anger. Anger was too easy, but in confirmation. His suspicion wasn't just grounded in personal experience anymore. There was a pattern. Amara continued. "There was a guy last month. Haitian-American businessman. Quiet, kind. Got downgraded mid-boarding to an economy jump seat. They said it was a computer error, but he overheard Bethany joking about standard upgrades while leading someone else to his spot." "Was it documented?" Amara shook her head. "Nothing formal. The company discourages internal reporting. There's a culture." Charles nodded. "I've seen that culture take many forms in my career. But it's worse when it hides behind procedure," she added. "They don't yell, they don't scream. They just smile and delete you." Silence settled between them as the aircraft pulled back from the gate. Overhead, the safety demonstration began. Neither of them looked up. Charles opened his tablet and started a new log entry. Anomaly Report 928A. Initial testimony. Crew culture indicators. He typed quickly, summarizing Amara's statements, cross-referencing them with known regulations and incident patterns. Beside him, Amara watched with quiet fascination. "You're building a report, aren't you?" "I'm building a case," Charles replied. The cabin jolted slightly as the plane taxied. The man on Charles's left belched audibly and reached into his snack bag again. "Sorry," the man mumbled. Charles ignored him. "You know," Amara said softly, "if Bethany knew who you really were, she'd probably be in the cockpit right now begging the pilot to turn this plane around." "Let's keep it that way. For now," Charles replied. "I'm more useful in silence." Another beat of silence. Then Amara reached into her carry-on and retrieved a slim notepad. "I've kept track," she said. "Dates, flight numbers, crew rotations. Not official logs, but my own records. You can have copies if they help." Charles accepted the notepad with solemn gratitude. "They will." For the first time since being reassigned, he didn't feel entirely alone. Somewhere above, champagne glasses clinked. But back in row 32, a quiet resistance had begun. Charles sat motionless in his cramped seat, his eyes calm, but behind the lenses of his glasses, his mind was already shifting into analytical mode. The cabin lights had dimmed, and the seatbelt sign had just pinged off as Flight 928 stabilized at cruising altitude. Around him, passengers settled in for the long journey, opening laptops, reclining seats, and scrolling through movies. But Charles wasn't interested in in-flight entertainment. He had work to do. From his inside jacket pocket, he retrieved a slim, matte black device that looked like a portable power bank. In reality, it was a secured FAA-issued signal extender, legal only for certain tiers of government use. He slid it into the pocket of the seatback in front of him, masking the action behind a stretch and a cough. A soft green light blinked once, then faded. Seconds later, his tablet connected to a hidden network invisible to the standard Wi-Fi. It hummed softly to life, unlocking a secure interface with tools meant for field inspections and incident documentation. He opened the app labeled Flight Environment Assessment Logger, FEAL. He began. Observation 1. Cart restraint unlock timestamp 1847 EST flight attendant, a past row 31 pushing beverage cart. Rear brake not engaged. Cart drifted 3 inches post-stop. Unstable during movement. Observation 2. Emergency equipment certification lapse. Timestamp 1853 EST fire extinguisher cabinet beside row 30, visibly marked with sticker. Inspection due July 2024. Today's date, August 18th. Observation 3. Obstructed access timestamp 1858 EST emergency exit row partially blocked by crew luggage. Black roller bag, untagged. Violation of FAA 121.585B. He documented each entry with corresponding federal citations, attaching photo evidence snapped discreetly from his tablet. Not dramatic violations, but enough to trigger a minor audit under standard FAA procedure. Combined with Bethany's conduct, a red flag flaring to life. Beside him, Amara leaned in. "You move fast." "I've learned not to wait," Charles replied, tapping notes with fluid precision. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "You want to know something most people wouldn't say out loud?" Charles paused, giving her his full attention. Bethany isn't just a senior attendant. She's connected, like directly connected. Her father sits on the Atlas Air Board of Directors. She's not just protected, she's used. She's their eyes and ears on high-stakes flights. Charles raised an eyebrow. "As in, intelligence gathering?" "Of a kind," Amara said. "She monitors crew loyalty. Who complains? Who questions? I've heard whispers that people who push back against her get redistributed. New assignments, demotions, quiet exits." Twist confirmed. "She's not confrontational, she's surgical," Amara continued. She doesn't yell. She doesn't punish. She lets the system do it for her. I know of 2 attendants who disappeared from premium rotation after they reported her for, well, you can guess. Charles narrowed his eyes. Discrimination? Amara nodded. They didn't even file formal reports, just mentioned it to supervisors. Weeks later, they were reassigned to back-to-back red eyes, worst routes, no upward mobility. Then gone. Performance-based rotation changes, the email said. Charles let out a breath, slow and measured. The implications were broader than just one seat reassignment or even a pattern of quiet racism. Bethany was embedded, institutionalized, weaponized. I assumed she was arrogant, he murmured. But she's strategic. You don't get away with this long by being sloppy, Amara replied. Charles looked down at his tablet. The report was growing. 3 violations now. Testimony from Amara, photographic proof, and emerging context of internal abuse of power. Still, he knew the system. Without stronger leverage, without an undeniable pattern, it would be chalked up to subjective experience. He needed more. Amara glanced around. You should know, Bethany already flagged you to the pilot. I saw the message flash on the crew tablet before she left the galley. Something about you being a concern. That was fast, Charles said, without surprise. She's positioning for preemptive justification. If you push back, they'll already have a narrative ready. You're combative, disruptive, hostile, even in silence. He tapped his fingers against the side of the tablet. They want escalation. It gives them control. So what do? We don't escalate, Charles said. We document, quietly, precisely, legally. He sent an encrypted backup of his observations to a secure FAA cloud server under the classification. Preliminary onboard safety and discrimination correlation log. Subject, Atlas Air 928. Then he added a 4th observation. Observation 4. Service disparity timestamp, 1915. EST beverage service skipped row 32. Flight attendant served rows ahead and behind. No acknowledgement. Notified by seatmate. Amara gave him a knowing smile. That's textbook. He nodded. And now, it's evidence. Far ahead, in first class, a gentle ding signaled another round of drink refills. Laughter filtered through the curtain. And in the shadows of economy, Dr. Charles Whitaker recorded every inch of a machine designed to erase him. Not this time. As the plane settled into its cruise, Charles felt the cabin quiet in that peculiar way only the midsection of long-haul flights could achieve. Conversations dimmed. Trays clicked shut. Overhead vents whispered cool air down on drowsy heads. But beneath that hush, something else stirred, something far more potent than sleep or silence. It began with a note, folded twice, the corner tucked under the edge of his tray table. Charles hadn't noticed anyone pass it. The handwriting was crisp, deliberate. Saw what happened. I filmed the entire thing. Don't let them erase it. 15C. Charles's eyes lifted toward the forward economy rows. Seat 15C, middle seat. His gaze met a woman with espresso-toned skin and a professional charcoal blazer. Late 30s, composed, purposeful. She caught his glance and gave the briefest nod before returning to her tablet. Civil rights attorney. Had to be. Charles had met enough to recognize the bearing. He typed a note into his tablet log. Witness footage, seat 15C. Initiate post-landing contact. A moment later, Amara leaned toward him. She's good people, she whispered. Name's Taylor Rodriguez. Represented flight attendants in a major harassment case last year. One big. Charles gave a subtle nod. Another crack in the armor. A small one, but widening. Then came the second approach. At the rear galley, just past the humming restrooms and supply compartments, Charles stepped out to stretch and refill his water cup. A tall man stood nearby, baseball cap low over his brow, sunglasses resting on his collar. Dr. Whitaker? Charles glanced over. I'm Captain Marcus Lee. Off duty today. Pacific Skies. I was in row 28 when they moved you. Charles kept his voice low. "Appreciate the discretion, Captain." "I've seen some stuff over the years, sir," Marcus said. "But that was targeted and baseless. I'll make a formal statement if needed." Charles extended his hand. "I'll hold you to that." Marcus shook it, firm and steady. "Also, FYI, the weight distribution excuse? Total nonsense. No flight certified for this range reassigns for trim at this stage, especially not one person in seat 2A. "I know," Charles replied. "Good." Marcus smiled faintly, "because they're going to lean on that. Hard." As Charles returned to his seat, the whispers had turned. What began as hushed sympathy had started shifting into something sharper. Observation, calculation, alliance. But it was the third contact that stunned him most. Half an hour later, as Charles reviewed FAA compliance guidelines for mid-flight safety audits, his tablet buzzed, just once. A message. No sender. No subject. "I'm in 38B. I used to fly captain before Bethany Lee took that from me." His eyes widened. Row 38B. That was almost at the very back. He glanced back discreetly but didn't rise. Instead, he responded with a secure ping through the onboard messaging system embedded in the FAA proxy network. "Please confirm. Name?" Seconds later, the reply came. "Captain Layla Morrison, Atlas Air, 12 years. Demoted after internal complaint. Bethany chaired the conduct review. No appeal allowed." Charles sat still for several seconds. The cabin seemed to tilt beneath him, not from turbulence, but from the gravitational pull of revelation. He typed again. "Are you safe?" Layla responded. "I'm quiet. That's how I survived. But I saw what she did to you. Same playbook. Will you testify? If it comes to that, I will." Charles closed his eyes for just a breath. Then he reopened his log, adding a new entry. "Witness report. Layla Morrison, former captain. Atlas Air demotion following complaint related to DEI violations. Chaired by Bethany Lee. Witness self-identified. Will testify if required." Amara, watching from the corner of her eye, leaned over. "You look like someone just gave you the master key." "She did," Charles said softly. "And it's a she?" "A former captain," he confirmed. "Another victim of Bethany's quiet empire." Amara's lips tightened into a firm line. "How many more are on this flight?" Charles didn't answer, but the calculation was already taking shape. If even 10% of this aircraft had witnessed or been touched by similar conduct, and if even half of them were willing to speak, he would have more than a report. He would have a case. Suddenly, the seat reassignment, the fake excuse, even the visible disdain, they were no longer isolated acts of prejudice. They were symptoms of an operational culture, and that culture had a face. Bethany Lee. Charles turned slowly toward the front of the plane, where the curtain to first class swayed ever so slightly with the movement of air, or perhaps with someone slipping through it. Bethany was back in control, but she had no idea who was now watching her, or how many. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft crossed into a new airspace. A familiar stillness fell over the passengers, most of whom were now half drowsy, cradling cups of soda or flicking through movie selections. But for Charles Whitaker, the silence didn't bring rest. It signaled preparation. He was deep in the fourth section of his onboard report, documenting inconsistencies in the beverage cart procedures, when a chime echoed through the cabin speakers. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bethany Lee's voice rang out with practiced calm. "This is your lead flight attendant speaking. Due to updated federal regulations concerning mid-flight data security, we are issuing a temporary restriction on photography and video recording for the remainder of the flight. This is to ensure the safety of our crew and protect all passengers from unauthorized surveillance. We thank you for your cooperation." Charles didn't even blink. Amara, beside him, leaned in with narrowed eyes. "That's not real." "No," Charles replied. "It's not." A few confused murmurs rippled through the rows, but most passengers, lulled into the passive rhythm of travel, barely noticed. Some locked their phones, others shrugged and returned to their books. But a few, Those who had been quietly watching Charles exchanged glances. Then Bethany appeared. Moving down the aisle with the poise of a surgeon on rounds, she carried a small black pouch in her gloved hands. Her expression was pleasant, her tone soft, but her eyes held the chill of enforcement. "Mr. Whitaker," she said smoothly, stopping at row 32. "I'll need to collect your personal devices. Temporary precaution." Charles turned to face her. "Under what regulation?" Bethany gave a well-practiced smile. "Company protocol. Security compliance, Section 14B. There is no Section 14B. Sir, I assure you, you're attempting to invoke non-existent regulation to confiscate federal equipment from a credentialed passenger," Charles said, still calm. "That's not a precaution. That's obstruction." Bethany's smile didn't falter, but her pupils contracted. "I'm going to ask one more time," she said, voice dropping. "Hand over your devices voluntarily." Charles didn't move. "No." Her lips thinned. Then came the twist. Without another word, Bethany turned and strode back toward the forward galley. Within minutes, something subtle shifted. Charles noticed it not in the air, but in his connection. The green icon in the corner of his tablet screen flashed yellow. Signal degraded. Rerouting. Network unavailable. Security authentication error. Charles's fingers stilled. "They're trying to jam you," Amara whispered. He nodded. "Not jamming, blocking, specifically targeting my device." "How?" Charles leaned forward, retrieving the discreet black module he'd placed earlier in the seat back pocket. It blinked faintly, green, but slower now. "She's using device fingerprinting," he murmured. "MAC address bands. The crew network has administrator access. They flagged my hardware signature and revoked it." Amara's eyebrows rose. "Can they do that?" "Not legally, but yes, technically." His tablet cycled through alternate connection points. Each attempt failed. Every signal from the plane's internal Wi-Fi refused the handshake. "She's trying to blind you," Amara muttered. "Erase the evidence pipeline." Bethany had done more than give him a bad seat. She was attempting to sever his federal connectivity. Charles suspected she hadn't anticipated he'd be operating on an encrypted tunnel routed through FAA clearance levels, but she knew enough to try. Unfortunately for her, so did he. He pulled a second device from his carry-on. A compact, matte black cylinder, no larger than a travel-size lotion bottle. He twisted the top once. A blue light pulsed. Immediately, the tablet reconnected. Not through the plane's Wi-Fi, but through a secure satellite tether established via the emergency beacon routing system used in disaster operations. It was untraceable from the crew interface. "New channel active," Charles said. Amara grinned. "Nice trick." Charles tapped a few commands. "Not a trick. Contingency protocol." Within seconds, the logs resumed uploading. The footage, the statements, the time-stamped violations, all resumed flowing to a secured FAA archive. He added a new entry. Interference attempt logged. Subject, Bethany Lee. Unauthorized access suspected. Crew administered MAC ban. Attempt to disable federal transmission. Emergency tether re-established via fallback. Minutes later, another chime. Bethany returned. "We've been informed there may be interference with flight operations due to a rogue device," she said calmly. "Security protocol requires us to identify any equipment that may cause transmission risk. Are you currently operating unauthorized communications equipment, Mr. Whitaker?" Charles smiled, genuinely this time. "Ms. Lee," he said, folding his hands, "I'm operating in full accordance with Federal Aviation Regulation 91.8. I am obligated to report observed violations, particularly those concerning passenger treatment and onboard safety procedures. I'm fulfilling my legal responsibility." A flash of alarm crossed her face, but it disappeared in an instant. "If you continue, I'll be forced to notify the captain and ground security." "You're free to do that," Charles said smoothly, "though I suspect by now, ground security already knows." Bethany's mouth opened, then closed. She turned and walked briskly away. Amara let out a slow breath. "She's rattled." "Good," Charles said, "because I'm not done." The aircraft glided through cloud cover, a soft turbulence nudging the cabin as Atlas Air Flight 928 maintained its course toward San Francisco. Or so everyone thought. Charles had just uploaded the latest batch of evidence logs when a low chime sounded overhead. The intercom crackled once, then cleared. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a minor technical concern, we'll be making a precautionary stop in Denver to assess the situation. We appreciate your patience and cooperation. Flight attendants, prepare the cabin for descent." The announcement sounded routine, calm, even professional. But Charles knew better. It was a pivot. "They're landing the plane," Amara whispered beside him, voice tight. "That's not routine." "No, it's not," Charles agreed. "It's retaliation." Just 2 minutes after Bethany's failed attempt to confiscate his devices, they were diverting the entire aircraft. The math wasn't difficult. The timing was too clean. Amara glanced nervously toward the galley. "You think she told the captain you were a threat?" "I think she's claiming I violated aviation security protocol," Charles said flatly. "Probably framed it as unauthorized data transmission or passenger non-compliance." Bethany had overplayed her hand, and Charles was done playing defense. He reached into his bag once more and pulled out a second tablet. A backup model, separate from the first, equipped with direct link credentials to the NTSB's emergency dispatch server. The device was registered under his secondary operational ID, rarely used unless a federal-level safety action was required. He powered it on. A soft red icon blinked in the corner. "Silent alert. Tier 3. Initiation available." Charles selected the option. A confirmation prompt appeared. "Activate Field Protocol 9.7. Aircraft safety threat. Request for immediate triage?" He pressed yes, then typed a message in the encoded dialog box. "Atlas Air 928. In-flight interference with federal documentation. Suspected abuse of authority by lead attendant. Attempted device seizure, Wi-Fi denial, and misinformation campaign. Diversion in progress under false pretenses. Request NTSB observation team on ground at DEN. DD Whitaker." He pressed send. The signal encrypted, bounced through 3 FAA satellites, and tunneled into the National Transportation Safety Board's internal network. Somewhere, a duty officer's phone vibrated, and within minutes, a notification would reach the necessary field agents. Charles closed the tablet gently and sat back. "You just called in the cavalry, didn't you?" Amara asked. He nodded once. "ETA?" "They'll be waiting on the tarmac." 10 minutes passed. The cabin darkened as the plane dipped into its descent. Passengers stirred, confused. Some leaned to peek through the windows, expecting San Francisco's coastline. Instead, the Rocky Mountains loomed beneath them, sprawling and jagged. Denver's sprawl crept closer. A low whisper grew among the passengers. Why were they landing? What was going on? Had something happened? Bethany reappeared, this time flanked by a second flight attendant. She carried herself with unnerving poise, her voice as smooth as melted butter. "We apologize for the inconvenience," she said, addressing passengers near row 32. "One of our guests has unfortunately violated our in-flight conduct policies. For your safety, we're making a brief stop to resolve the issue, and we'll be on our way shortly after." Charles stared forward, unmoving. "She's planting the narrative," Amara whispered. "She's painting you as dangerous." "She's laying the groundwork for a removal," Charles said. "Public safety concern. Creates legal cover." A passenger across the aisle frowned. "Wait, what kind of violation? Who violated what?" Bethany smiled, tight-lipped. "I'm not at liberty to disclose individual passenger matters, but everything is under control." Charles didn't respond. He didn't rise. He simply resumed typing on his primary tablet. "Descent initiated. Public pretext established. Anticipate security boarding. Maintaining documentation. Request NTSB Denver confirmation." 5 minutes later, a reply came. Encrypted, but unmistakable. Field Unit Denver, response confirmed. NTSB observers en route to Gate C1, FAA notified. Prepare for immediate post-landing coordination. Agent R. Sterling. Charles exhaled slowly. The plane touched down with a smooth bounce, the landing gear gripping the runway. But instead of taxiing to the main terminal, it veered to the far edge of the tarmac, toward a service zone where maintenance vehicles sat idle. Unmarked vans idled in the distance, and just beyond them, 3 black SUVs rolled into position. Bethany passed by again, her smile now taut with anticipation. She leaned toward Charles. "You'll be escorted from the plane," she said under her breath, "and you won't be flying anywhere else today." Charles met her gaze. "On the contrary, Ms. Lee, I believe I'll be exactly where I'm supposed to be." She froze. Then, from the front of the aircraft, the door opened. The cold air of Denver swept inside, biting and sharp. A set of portable stairs was wheeled into place. Security officials stepped on board, their posture tense, hands near holsters. "Sir," one said to Charles, "please gather your belongings and come with us. We've been informed of a potential onboard security issue involving unauthorized electronic activity." Charles didn't flinch. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a black leather wallet, the kind issued only to upper-tier federal investigators. He flipped it open. The badge gleamed. "Dr. Charles Whitaker, Deputy Director, National Transportation Safety Board. This aircraft is now under active safety review." The entire cabin fell silent. The security officers, 3 of them, all clad in Navy uniforms with TSA patches, stood just inside the aircraft's forward galley. One gestured toward Charles with a practiced authority. "Sir, please gather your belongings. We've been notified of an incident requiring immediate deboarding." Every passenger within sight froze mid-motion. Heads turned. Seatbelts remained fastened, but hands instinctively reached for phones. Eyes flicked between the officers and the man seated quietly in 32E, a figure until now reduced to whispers and assumptions. Charles didn't blink. Beside him, Amara stiffened. "They're really doing this." Bethany stood several feet behind the officers, arms crossed, posture smug. Her smile was back, the same sharp smile she wore when she first dismissed him from 2A. Charles rose slowly. He didn't raise his voice, didn't posture. He simply reached into the inner pocket of his blazer and removed a black leather-bound credential wallet. With one precise motion, he flipped it open toward the lead officer. "Dr. Charles Whitaker, Deputy Director of the National Transportation Safety Board." The badge glinted beneath the cabin lights, silver and blue, unmistakable. The embedded chip blinked red once as it activated the live clearance code. The lead officer froze. His expression shifted from procedural detachment to startled disbelief. Behind him, Bethany's face drained of color. "I'm currently executing a federally authorized field observation under Title 49 of the United States Code," Charles continued, voice calm but firm. "As of this moment, Atlas Air Flight 928 is under emergency audit pending confirmed violations of both operational safety protocol and civil rights regulations." A beat of stunned silence fell over the cabin. Then, a passenger near the aisle gasped. "Wait, he's FAA? He's NTSB? Holy hell," someone whispered. "She kicked off a federal investigator." In first class, the man occupying Charles's original seat fumbled for his phone. Amara pulled hers out and hit record, holding it steady toward Bethany. Bethany opened her mouth, then closed it again. Charles stepped into the aisle. "This aircraft will remain grounded until such time as a full inspection has been completed. No crew member is to leave the plane. No passenger is to be removed without written directive from the FAA or NTSB Regional Command." "You can't do this," Bethany snapped, her voice trembling. "This isn't procedure. You're overstepping." "I'm invoking Protocol 2941B, Charles said, without missing a beat. "You're welcome to contest it through the proper channels. In the meantime, you'll remain where you are." The security officers instinctively stepped aside as Charles moved forward. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His authority echoed louder than any raised voice. Behind him, the murmurs of the passengers grew louder. A man across the aisle stood up and clapped. Once, then again. Someone joined in. Another followed. And within seconds, a round of scattered, unsure but undeniable applause filled the rear of the plane. "He stood up without saying a word," one woman whispered to her seatmate. "Not without saying a word," her neighbor replied. "He said everything." Charles approached the front of the cabin, eyes forward. The curtain between first class and economy remained open now, symbolically and literally. Bethany hadn't moved. She looked stunned, her hands now clasped in front of her like a child caught in a lie too deep to reverse. Suddenly, a young man 2 rows back raised his phone above his head and said, "You're live, sir, on stream. The world's watching." Charles glanced at the screen and saw a real-time broadcast. Had "Seat for Power" was trending. The title beneath read, "Passenger Humiliated. Turns out to be FAA Powerhouse." Tens of thousands of live viewers, dozens of supportive comments scrolling upward in a blur. He nodded once. "Good," then turned to face the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice projected without shouting, "this flight has become the subject of a federal safety and discrimination inquiry. I apologize for the disruption to your travel plans, but your cooperation ensures that what happened today does not continue unnoticed or unchallenged." In first class, the white businessman who had taken Charles's seat looked down at his hands. Even he knew the show was over. Bethany took a step back, but Charles caught her gaze and held it. "Ms. Lee," he said, tone unyielding, "any attempt to tamper with communication channels, falsify crew logs, or suppress passenger testimony will be treated as obstruction of justice. Do I make myself clear?" Bethany opened her mouth, then simply nodded. Satisfied, Charles turned toward the lead security officer. "Please inform your supervisor that this flight is now under federal hold. The NTSB response team will arrive within minutes. Until then, no movement." "Yes, sir," the officer said quickly. Passengers throughout the plane began whispering to one another. Some clapped again. Others sat in awed silence. A few simply pulled out their phones and captured the moment. A passenger who had been forcibly demoted, now standing at the helm of accountability. Back at his seat, Amara exhaled deeply. "That," she murmured to herself, "was worth every second of the walk to the back." Charles didn't return to seat 32E. He stayed at the front, near the open galley, where he could see everything and be seen. Not as a man displaced, but as the man in charge. The cabin doors hissed open again, this time not for security officers, but for a different kind of presence. One that carried the authority of systems, not sidearms. 3 individuals stepped aboard wearing dark blue windbreakers with gold-lettered embroidery across the chest. NTSB, Federal Inspector. They moved with silent coordination, clipboards and tablets in hand, eyes scanning everything, not just passengers and crew, but the layout of the galley, the position of carts, the condition of panels and latches. "Inspector Regina Sterling," the lead said, flashing her badge. "Atlas Air Flight 928 is now under active federal audit. All flight operations are suspended until further notice." The passengers murmured, some pulling out phones, others watching in stunned silence. The flight attendants froze mid-motion. Bethany stood near the cockpit door, her face pale, eyes flickering between the inspectors and Charles, who stood just behind them with arms folded. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Sterling turned to Charles. "Deputy Director Whitaker, you called for a Tier 3 audit?" "I did," Charles replied. "Suspected violations of maintenance record integrity, crew conduct policy, and in-flight safety compliance. Also potential systemic discrimination in passenger treatment protocols." Sterling nodded once and turned to her team. "Begin with equipment validation, then passenger interviews, then crew records." The inspectors fanned out. Within minutes, one was crouched by the fire extinguisher Charles had logged earlier. She removed the unit and scanned its barcode. "Expired," she said crisply. "By 6 weeks." Another inspector opened an overhead compartment in the galley and revealed a set of oxygen masks in sealed bags, 2 of which were visibly tampered with. Their seals had been removed and reapplied with adhesive tape. Sterling looked to Charles. "You logged this?" "Yes, 3 hours ago." Charles led her toward the emergency exit row mid-cabin. "Here, the obstruction is crew luggage." A third inspector snapped photos and took measurements. "Access is reduced by 18 inches. That violates minimum clearance." Passengers were now fully alert. Phones filmed freely. Several were pulled aside by a fourth team member who had just boarded, FAA liaison, in plain clothes, badge on belt. She asked for witness statements, starting with Taylor Rodriguez in 15C, who handed over her phone without hesitation. "I filmed everything," Taylor said, "from the seat reassignment to the attempted device confiscation." Meanwhile, Bethany had retreated into the cockpit doorway, speaking in hushed tones to the pilot. The inspectors took note. One of them approached. "Captain Hayes?" The man in the cockpit stepped out, adjusting his tie. "Yes. Please be advised that per NTSB protocol, your authority over this aircraft is now suspended pending review. You'll remain in place until a field investigator clears you." The captain nodded grimly. Back in the galley, one inspector knelt beside a locked drawer. "What's in here?" she asked Bethany, holding up a key ring. Bethany hesitated. "Sanitized supplies." The inspector unlocked it. Inside were crew incident logs. Handwritten, some torn, others partially filled. One had an entry with Charles's seat number circled, labeled "Passenger flagged, non-compliant." Sterling read it, her eyes narrowing. "When was this written?" Bethany didn't answer. Amara, standing a few feet away, spoke up. "That wasn't there an hour ago." Sterling turned to Bethany again. "Did you fabricate this after the diversion?" Bethany's throat worked silently, but no sound came. "Please step aside," Sterling said. "You're now subject to individual review." At that moment, one of the other flight attendants, an older black woman in her mid-50s, stepped forward. Her name tag read D. Riley. "I need to say something," she said, voice steady but pained. Sterling nodded. "Go ahead." "I've worked for this airline 22 years. I've flown with Bethany at least 40 times, Riley said, eyes on Charles. "I signed an incident alert about her 3 years ago, quietly. Filed it through the internal portal. I thought that would be enough." "What happened to the report?" Charles asked gently. "It disappeared," Riley said, "and I got dropped from international rotation the next quarter." "Retaliation," Sterling muttered, noting the statement. Riley's hand trembled slightly. "I didn't think she'd escalate like this. I didn't think she'd displace someone like you. Not publicly, not so blatantly. She's had protection," Amara added. "Connections. Her father sits on the board." Sterling's face tightened. "Then we'll escalate too." Another inspector returned with a clipboard. "Confirmed. At least 6 maintenance logs appear altered. Handwriting mismatches, whiteout usage. 3 safety systems show prior fault codes, but were signed off as cleared with no digital timestamp." "Forgery," Charles said aloud. Sterling nodded. "And that makes it criminal." As the sun set outside the aircraft, the interior lights cast a sterile glow over an unraveling system. The passengers who had once stared in silence now whispered with rising outrage. Charles watched their expressions shift. Confusion, concern, then comprehension. This was no longer about one seat. It hadn't been for a long time. He added a final note to his tablet. "Audit Phase 1 complete. Violations confirmed. Equipment expiration, obstruction of exits, falsified maintenance logs, retaliatory crew practices, discrimination corroborated by testimony and patterns. Escalate to Tier 4 review. Recommend suspension of lead attendant and supervisory staff." He pressed send, and the real storm began. Back at the front of the aircraft, Charles sat with his tablet resting across his knees, its screen glowing with columns of code, metadata, and access logs. Around him, the cabin buzzed with tension. The NTSB inspectors continued their sweep. Bethany had been quietly escorted to a crew jump seat near the exit, her silence now far louder than her previous authority. But Charles wasn't watching her anymore. He was watching the data. Access to Atlas Air's internal crew network had been partially unlocked through a security breach logged during the attempt to disable his connection. The system, meant for flight management, held more than just service logs or passenger manifests. It contained behavioral algorithms, seating matrices, and internal flags for passenger profile optimization. Charles tapped into one subdirectory labeled OptiSeat. Its interface was clean, simple, deceptively innocuous, but the functionality it offered was anything but. He opened the documentation. OptiSeat v3.2. Dynamic Passenger Experience Redistribution System developed to enhance perceived comfort, minimize tension in high-tier cabins, and optimize visual conformity to luxury expectations. Charles leaned back, stunned. "Visual conformity?" Amara whispered, reading over his shoulder. He nodded grimly. "It's coded language. Ethnicity, perceived socioeconomic status, behavioral likelihood. Evaluated by AI based on past bookings, name data, facial scans from check-in. It's calculating who fits a cabin's aesthetic. It's eugenics in a booking algorithm," she murmured. A list of tags appeared under sample logs. Flag, high disruption probability, HDP. Flag, non-conforming appearance, NCA. Flag, premium cabin tension risk, PCTR. Each flag was generated by the system and, in some cases, manually approved by senior staff. One particular name caught Charles's attention in the administrator logs. User ID, ELE, Amara pointed at it. "Bethany?" "No," Charles said slowly. "Her ID was BLE, Air." He scrolled further. Another entry appeared. User ID, Greg Quao P. Last access, 11 days ago. Final override. Approve OptiSeat Update 3.2 rollout. Executive confirmed. Gregory Palmer, CEO of Atlas Air. Charles's breath caught in his chest. "Palmer," he said aloud. "He didn't just authorize this. He's the one who deployed it. Final approval of the system came directly from his account." Amara froze. "Bethany's father?" Charles looked at her, then back to the screen. The pieces were aligning too perfectly to ignore. Bethany was the test case, field executor, the public face. But the architect, the one shielding her, was sitting at the top the whole time. He dug deeper into the logs. More connections surfaced. Internal memos masked as technical updates, directives routed through HR to enhance cultural fit in premium cabins, language carefully crafted to avoid legal flags but unmistakable in intent. This wasn't the product of one rogue employee. It was a system, 5 years in the making. Charles opened a report folder tied to OptiSeat's beta rollout. Objective: reduce escalated conflicts in first-class cabins by 12% within target demographic sectors. Methodology: adjust cabin assignments for flagged passengers during boarding using automated technical issue alerts to justify reassignment. Result: decrease in premium cabin complaints, internal metric, but increase in unfiled passenger dissatisfaction reports noted. And below it, handwritten approval. Final sign-off, G. Palmer, executive authorization, discretion advised. "That's it," Amara said. "That's the proof." "It's more than proof," Charles replied. "It's intent and coordination." He began compiling screenshots, exporting logs, time-stamping every administrator action, especially the ones where passengers, mostly non-white, had been tagged with vague risk identifiers. Back in the cabin, murmurs turned into quiet outrage as passengers learned what was unfolding. Taylor Rodriguez walked up the aisle with her phone. "The live stream is at 200,000 views. 4Power is number 3 nationwide." Charles didn't look up. Make sure every document gets saved to the shared drive. They'll try to kill this from the top. Amara nodded, already on it. And then came the final blow. Charles tapped into the crew messaging archive. A conversation between Bethany and another supervisor from 2 months ago appeared. Bethany: one of the flagged passengers complained again. He's saying it's about race. I need this buried. Supervisor: run it through PCTR. Use the wait excuse, then archive it. Bethany: done. Dad says Ops needs clean numbers for the contract review. Charles stared at the screen. Contract review? Amara asked. He scrolled further. Another message. Bethany: if this goes sideways, he'll pull the system. But until then, keep the optics tight. Optics, Charles repeated under his breath. That's what this was always about. Not safety, not service, just appearances, controlled perception. Outside the window, the Denver tarmac glowed orange in the setting sun. Inside the aircraft, a storm had already broken. Charles compiled everything into one report, labeling it NTSB Preliminary Investigation, Atlas Air, OptiSeat Program and Associated Discrimination Protocols, filed by Deputy Director Charles Whitaker. Attachments: 94 evidence files, scope, corporate conspiracy, executive level involvement priority level, red. He hit send. And in that moment, the tide shifted. Not just against Bethany, but against the entire system that had enabled her. The air inside the cabin was thick with tension. Not from fear, but from revelation. Passengers whispered to one another as they watched Charles work with focused precision, his fingers moving methodically across the screen of his tablet. Around him, federal investigators and FAA agents moved like quiet ghosts, gathering equipment, photographing evidence, conducting interviews. The plane had been transformed into a floating crime scene. Amara leaned in, her eyes serious. I have something you need to see. She reached into her bag and pulled out a slim USB drive, taped to the inside flap of her FAA trainee badge. She peeled it off and handed it to Charles. What is it? He asked. Training documents. Internal material they gave us during our week 1 onboarding, she replied. Most people skipped it, but I read everything. There's a whole section on cabin composure management, and buried in the language, they use codes to classify passengers based on how they align with the brand image. It's subtle, but it's there. Charles plugged the drive into a secondary tablet. Within seconds, a folder labeled CCP Orientation Atlas VV4 opened. He scrolled through a series of PDFs, PowerPoints, and embedded videos. At first glance, the content seemed standard. Customer service guidelines, emergency procedures, branding tips. Then he saw it. Page 42 of a training document titled Premium Cabin Presence, Ensuring Visual Cohesion, included a section labeled Passenger Classification Matrix, VCE Level Compliance, VCE, Visual Comfort Enhancement Tier 3, Unverified Guest Profiles, VCE Risk, Elevated Appearance, Deviation, Moderate to High Behavioral Predictability, Low Recommended Action, Discrete Reassignment to Alternative Cabin Zone when possible. Use technical justification, e.g., seat calibration error, weight distribution, IT glitch. Beneath that, another line in bold italics. Maintain optical harmony in premium spaces. First class is the face of the brand. Preserve its integrity. Charles leaned back slowly. It's coded racism, Amara said, her voice low but vibrating with anger. They're just using corporate speak to say that if someone looks like they don't belong, especially black or brown, they get quietly bumped. He nodded. And they trained it into the onboarding. Made it policy. He opened the metadata on the file. The author tag read, Executive Board, Branding Division. The approval tag bore one name, G. Palmer, Final Approval, Confidential. Charles took a deep breath. That's enough. But it wasn't over. Not even close. His phone vibrated in his pocket. A number flashed on the screen. Private caller. Charles answered. "This is Dr. Whitaker." A pause, then a voice. Smooth, commanding, and unmistakably used to giving orders. "Dr. Whitaker, this is Gregory Palmer, CEO of Atlas Air." Charles kept his tone neutral. "I was expecting your call." "I hope we can have a civilized conversation," Palmer said. "I understand you've stumbled across certain internal materials. I'm hoping we can resolve this matter before things escalate any further." "Things have already escalated, Mr. Palmer," Charles replied. "Let's not be dramatic," Palmer said lightly. "You're a man of reason, and I respect that. But this entire incident, it's a misunderstanding that doesn't warrant public spectacle. A few overzealous employees, a misinterpreted system." Charles didn't respond. He tapped the record button on his tablet and turned the speaker on. Palmer continued. "I'd hate to see your name caught up in political headlines. I know how these things go. The media loves a scandal, and you'd be dragged through the fire with us. I assume that's not what you want. Is that a threat, Mr. Palmer?" "Of course not," Palmer said, chuckling softly. "Just a strategic suggestion. Let us handle it quietly. No press, no subpoenas, and in exchange, we're prepared to offer a considerable settlement. Confidential, of course." "You're offering to buy my silence," Charles said flatly. "I'm offering you a clean way out, one that protects everyone." Charles looked up at Amara, then down at the training document still open on his screen. "I'll decline," he said. A long pause. Palmer's voice darkened. "You're making a mistake." "No," Charles replied. "You did. 5 years ago when you turned discrimination into a data point." He ended the call. A moment later, he uploaded the full audio recording and attached it to his report. Then he opened a new draft, this one titled Press Briefing Draft, Atlas Air Systemic Discrimination Exposé, prepared by Charles Whitaker, Deputy Director, NTSB. He checked the time. The media would already be gathering outside the terminal. Amara stood beside him. "You're really going to do it?" "I have no choice." 30 minutes later, standing at a portable podium on the tarmac outside Gate Sifuan, Charles adjusted the microphone. Cameras flashed. News vans lined the curb. Behind him, FAA agents flanked his sides, and a crowd of passengers, now witnesses, watched from the terminal windows. "My name is Charles Whitaker," he began, voice steady. "I serve as Deputy Director of the National Transportation Safety Board. What began today as a personal humiliation has become a moment of institutional reckoning." He paused, letting the weight settle. "In the course of a single flight, we identified multiple safety violations, falsified maintenance records, and targeted acts of discrimination, all enabled by a proprietary internal system called OptiSeat, which uses coded language to suppress certain passengers based on perceived visual compatibility." Reporters leaned forward. "This system, approved and signed by Atlas Air CEO Gregory Palmer, systematically reassigned passengers of color away from first-class cabins under false pretenses. It violated federal safety regulations, civil rights protections, and basic human dignity." He clicked a remote. On the screen beside him, the training document Amara had uncovered appeared. Then, the audio. Palmer's voice echoed clearly over the speakers. "I'm offering you a clean way out. I'd hate to see your name caught up in political headlines." The press gasped. "Let this serve as a message to any organization that believes image is more important than justice," Charles said. "The skies belong to everyone, not just the ones who look the part." Behind him, Amara stood proud. Taylor Rodriguez clapped. Captain Layla Morrison nodded silently from the terminal glass, tears in her eyes. The world was watching now, and Charles had made sure they saw everything. 1 week after the Denver incident, Charles Whitaker stood beneath the marble columns of the United States Capitol, his tailored Navy suit now accompanied by the subtle gleam of national attention. He had not returned home. He had not rested. And the world had not stopped asking questions. He hadn't planned on becoming a symbol. But here he was. The congressional hearing room was packed. Media cameras lined the walls. Senators, both seasoned and newly elected, filled the semicircle before him. Behind Charles sat members of the NTSB, FAA, civil rights leaders, and quietly, Amara Johnson, Captain Layla Morrison, and Taylor Rodriguez. The chairwoman of the Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Gloria Hernandez, adjusted her microphone and addressed the room. "We are here today to investigate not just the violations exposed on Flight 928, she began, but the deeper, systemic design failures, both technological and ethical, that made them possible." She turned to Charles. "Dr. Whitaker, please begin." He stood, shoulders square. "Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. What occurred aboard Atlas Air 928 was not a technical error. It was not an isolated lapse. It was the result of 5 years of intentional policy, buried beneath corporate language, automated discrimination, and a culture that protected optics over integrity." He paused. What began as a quiet reassignment of a seat revealed a structure of prejudice, encoded into algorithms, reinforced by executive approval, and executed by crew with no avenue for accountability. Senator Marcus Lee leaned in. "Dr. Whitaker, to clarify, are you stating that the discriminatory behavior was institutionalized?" Charles nodded. "Yes, Senator. Systemic, deliberate, and approved at the highest levels of leadership." He continued, outlining the OptiSeat system, the training documents, the falsified maintenance logs, and the audio recording from Gregory Palmer himself. The room remained silent as the full breadth of the conspiracy unfolded in stark, undeniable clarity. Then came the bombshell. A junior congressional aide approached the chair and handed over a printed email. Senator Hernandez read it once, her brow tightening, then looked up. "Dr. Whitaker," she said, "are you aware of an internal communication dated 2 years ago, sent from Gregory Palmer to the Atlas Air Executive Strategy Team?" "No, ma'am," Charles replied. "Allow me to read it into the record." She held up the paper. "If we keep allowing people like Whitaker into premium cabins, we'll lose the brand edge. People like him belong in the shuttle bus, not the headline photo. Manage accordingly." The room went cold. Gasps erupted. Phones buzzed as aides whispered to reporters. Even seasoned senators exchanged looks of shock and revulsion. Charles stood motionless. Amara, seated just behind him, felt her throat tighten. "Where did that come from?" Senator Lee asked. Hernandez answered. "Anonymous whistleblower from Atlas Air Legal Division. Confirmed authentic by 3 independent analysts, time-stamped and archived." Senator Thompson, a conservative voice who had been quiet until now, leaned forward. "I may not agree with every regulatory expansion, but I know filth when I read it. That email is filth." Silence again. Then Senator Hernandez spoke. "Dr. Whitaker, you've not only exposed misconduct, you've shown us what systemic accountability can look like. We'd like you to chair a working group to draft a legislative response." Charles blinked, surprised. "We're calling it the Whitaker Protocol." A murmur moved through the chamber. "Your task," she continued, "will be to help us write into law what no algorithm, no executive, and no uniform can override. Dignity." The next 4 weeks were a whirlwind. Charles met daily with Senate aides, aviation experts, civil rights attorneys, and engineers. Amara joined the task force as liaison to flight crews. Captain Morrison provided first-hand accounts of retaliation culture within Flight Command. Taylor Rodriguez coordinated testimony from over a dozen passengers across multiple airlines. The proposal took shape quickly. The Whitaker Protocol, mandatory transparency in seating algorithms and AI-driven cabin assignment tools. Whistleblower protections for aviation employees, including anonymous channels linked directly to the DOT. Third-party audits of crew conduct logs, with penalties for falsification. Passenger Bill of Rights expansion, codifying protections from discriminatory reassignment. Federal oversight of airline branding policies tied to passenger profiling. Within 6 weeks, the bill reached the Senate floor. The CEO of Atlas Air, Gregory Palmer, had already been indicted on multiple counts: obstruction of justice, civil rights violations, falsifying federal documentation. Bethany Lee, arrested shortly after the flight, now faced charges including perjury and conspiracy to defraud transportation systems. Their downfall had been rapid and very public, but Charles remained focused, not on punishment, but on prevention. The day of the Senate vote, he stood in the gallery above the chamber floor, surrounded by the people who had stood with him at 32E. The vote tally appeared on the screen. Senate vote, Whitaker Protocol, yes, 100 done, no, 0 unanimous. The chamber erupted into applause. Reporters leapt to their feet. Amara grabbed Charles's hand. "You did it," she whispered. "No," he replied. "We did." That night, Charles walked through the Capitol Rotunda alone, hands in his pockets. He paused beneath the mural of the Wright brothers and looked up, not at the painting, but at the idea. Flight had always represented something more than transportation: freedom, possibility, elevation, and now, finally, equity. The gate agent smiled as she scanned his boarding pass. "Welcome aboard, Dr. Whitaker." Charles nodded with quiet grace, offering a polite smile. He walked down the jet bridge of a newly rebranded airline, Equijet, one of several new carriers to emerge in the post-Whitaker Protocol era. The name alone suggested what many now expected from air travel: equity, fairness, dignity. The interior of the aircraft felt different from the moment he stepped inside. Not because the seats were more spacious or the lighting softer, though both were true, but because of something intangible, something deeper. Every crew member greeted him with respect. Not performative, not mechanical, genuine. At the forward galley, a black male flight attendant, a Latina junior purser, and an older white male crew chief worked side by side, chatting, checking manifests, laughing softly. Diversity wasn't a quota anymore. It was a given. "Dr. Whitaker," said the woman in the captain's seat, stepping briefly into the cabin. "It's an honor. I'm Captain May Nakamura. We've met once at the Seattle Aviation Ethics Conference." Charles stood a little taller. "Yes, I remember. You spoke about cultural blind spots in cockpit communication protocols. And you challenged every panelist to think harder," she said, grinning. "You inspired me to stay in command. Thank you." She returned to the cockpit, leaving him momentarily speechless. Charles found his seat, 1A aisle, first class. His name stitched discreetly on a welcome card beside a cup of green tea. He sat down, stowed his briefcase, and gazed out the window. The tarmac bustled with activity, but inside, all was calm. Across the aisle, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, with tight curls and wide, curious eyes, tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered something. She hesitated, then nodded. The boy leaned toward Charles. "Excuse me, sir. Are you the man from the videos?" Charles raised an eyebrow, amused. "That depends. What videos?" "The ones they showed us at school," the boy said. "About how airplanes used to treat people unfair, but you made them stop." Charles smiled gently. "I helped start something. A lot of people made it stop." The boy grinned. "My grandpa said you were the first person to ever make an airplane land just to tell the truth." His mother shushed him gently, but Charles chuckled. "That's one way to put it." "Did it scare you?" the boy asked. Charles thought about that long moment on the tarmac in Denver, when the door had opened and the system tried to remove him. He thought about Bethany's face, Palmer's threats, the cameras flashing, the weight of centuries pressing down on one aisle seat. "Yes," he said truthfully, but it felt worse to stay silent. The boy nodded solemnly, as if understanding something far older than his years. The mother mouthed a quiet, "Thank you," and Charles nodded in return. The seatbelt sign chimed. The aircraft pulled from the gate. Overhead, the pre-recorded safety video began, featuring crew members of every shade, gender, and age, each explaining the protocols in their own languages and dialects. It was seamless, inclusive, and profoundly human. As the plane ascended into the sky, Charles closed his eyes and took a long, steady breath. 1 year had passed, 12 months since Seat 2A was ripped from under him. And now, he occupied Seat 1A not because of title or compensation, but because the world had changed. He had changed it. The Whitaker Protocol had been adopted not just federally, but globally. Airlines in Europe, Asia, and Africa revised their digital systems, dismantled their image-based seating codes, and began mandatory equity compliance audits. Some resisted, most adapted. Executives who had built their empires on appearance and silence were now being replaced by those who understood nuance, transparency, and culture. CEOs gave fewer speeches about profit and more about inclusion. Some were sincere, some were catching up, but all were accountable. And Bethany? Sentenced to 4 years in federal prison with a 5-year industry ban, she'd become a cautionary tale in flight crew ethics training. Her image, once seen as the gold standard of in-flight service, was now a footnote under abuse of discretion and trust. Gregory Palmer, indicted, disgraced, and stripped of all aviation board positions. His downfall marked the end of an era where elite corporate rooms dictated who could breathe premium air. Charles opened his briefcase and pulled out a slim box, wrapped in dark velvet, no bigger than a glasses case. He placed it on his lap, fingers running across its surface. Amara had given it to him a week ago after a quiet lunch near Capitol Hill. "No speeches," she'd said. "Just something you should have had back." He opened the lid. Inside, mounted under a crystal pane, was a weathered boarding pass. Atlas Air 928. Passenger, Charles Whitaker, Seat 2A. But beneath it, in Amara's handwriting, it read, Seat 2A, where everything changed. Charles felt something stir in his chest. Not pain, not even pride. Just quiet clarity. They had tried to bury him in that seat. Instead, it had become his podium. He closed the case, slid it gently into his briefcase, and looked outside. Clouds passed below like whispers. Above them, the sky remained endlessly open. And now, for every passenger, no matter how they looked, where they came from, or what seat they held, that sky belonged to them too.